Hey gang, what's good? Welcome to my very first post-playthrough review. This time, we're covering Mass Effect Andromeda, which I just recently finished on Insanity difficulty on my PC via Origin. I'll be using clips of my own playthrough that I've uploaded here on my channel. Now, over the years I've come to appreciate the out of 5 rating scale. I think it makes for harder and more interesting choices, as well as helping to alleviate how arbitrary things can feel on larger scales. So, naturally, that's what I'll be using. Also, this should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway. The majority of a review is subjective. Use my opinions as a lens through which you see your own. Hopefully, we'll see pretty eye to eye. Well, let's cut to the chase. I think Mass Effect Andromeda deserves a 2 out of 5. Unsurprisingly, I don't think it's very good at all. I think only die-hard Mass Effect fans with an unquenchable curiosity should even consider playing it. That, or if you have an interest in the multiplayer, which I thought wasn't half bad. Of course, the usual warnings when concerning multiplayer apply. Expect community size to diminish over time, and be wary of unsavory changes or additions. Although BioWare is apparently finished with a single player, they've said that they still intend to work on the multiplayer component. Now, the cynic in me would wager that's because they're still making some money off of the multiplayer, being as there's microtransactions in there. Okay, let's get deeper into it, huh? Spoilers ahead. So, first, why a 2 instead of just a 1? Well, as I said, I had a good time with the multiplayer. I also think some of the missions are worthwhile.
Surprise.
But we'll get into that more later. As for the multiplayer, it's just like Mass Effect 3's 4-player horde mode with character and equipment upgrades via loot boxes that you can buy with currency earned through playing or spending real money. Don't get me wrong though, the multiplayer isn't without its problems. You see, it uses peer-to-peer hosting for the matches. So, if your host has a poor internet connection, or they're just far away from where you are, you're going to run into latency problems. Now, being as none of my friends got the game, I had to matchmake with random folks, and sometimes that was pretty darn bad. Moving on, let's get into the single player. It would be remiss of me not to at least mention the current zeitgeist surrounding the game. That being folks taking a steaming hot dump on the animations and character models. BioWare's put out a few patches aimed at fixing and changing these things. There's noticeable improvements, but it's still not great. However, I will say that I think a lot of folks who decry this part of the game are missing the point of what really, down in its heart of hearts, makes Mass Effect Andromeda a bad game. Let's start with the more objective problems, technical and user interface. I'm willing to do some hand-waving and dismiss bugs that just look funny. It's definitely a factor, but I think games can still be good in spite of that. The problem are bugs that directly impact the gameplay. I actually encountered one such bug myself. I was underground in one of the remnant vaults, got cocky and died. Instead of respawning back inside the vault, I respawned at my ship, and man, the world was completely messed up. Where the fuck are we?
Yeah. Still hot.
Going back, I said that the UI had some problems. It's an absolute pain to navigate, and the information on display is a little lacking. This is especially the case when it comes to crafting custom weapons and armor, which have the potential to be some of the most powerful items in the game, so it's definitely something you want to do. Managing mods and augments is incredibly finicky. Some of these menus feel like that, with better design, they could have really cut back on the button presses needed to use and navigate them. Finally, the last big technical issue I had was the loading screens. Though, admittedly, this is part technical and part design, mission design specifically. So, the issue stems from just how many loading screens there are. If you haven't played the game, I'll try to illustrate this for you. You're currently in a settlement on Planet A, and you've just gotten a side mission to travel to an outpost on Planet B. First, you'll either need to run directly to your ship or use the extract function on the Nomad, your planet-side vehicle. This gets you into orbit around Planet A. That's one loading screen. Next, you need to navigate the galaxy map and fly your ship between systems. This is another loading screen. Once you're in Planet B's system, you need to fly to Planet B itself. This used to be a loading screen, but they've since made it skippable. Anyway, once you're at Planet B, you still need to land on Planet B. This gets you a loading screen. Finally, when you're planetside, you'll need to go through one more loading screen to fast travel as close as possible to your mission destination. Oh, but if Planet B is Coderre, you actually get a cool bonus. You see, on Coderre, you begin in town, and the only way to get to the regular play area is by taking a lift, which is a loading screen. And not even one of the kinds from Mass Effect 1, where your squad mates talk to each other. So, that's 4 to 5 loading screens for just one side mission. But who's keeping count? Oh, right, and this quest you may have, it may ask you to return to Planet A to turn it back in. Maybe there's even a Planet C that you need to go to. Or perhaps you just need to go back to Planet A to continue the rest of your missions that you were already doing. Now, I get it, I do. You want to have your galaxy feel big, like, well, a galaxy. But this shouldn't be the cost, let alone the fact that I'm not convinced this even conveys that feeling. There was no shortage of side missions, just like this, that could have so easily been resolved by calling another character on your Omni tool or on the ship's vidcon. There's literally a side mission in which you set up a communications beacon on each new planet. It's ridiculous to think that going through that many loading screens is worth a single conversation for a side mission. Now, this brings us to the subjective problems that I had. Those side missions, a lot of them are either forgettable or, unfortunately, one note. The overall writing and storytelling in Andromeda really runs the gamut between decent and horrific. Let's look at loyalty missions, which gives us 2 great examples of this disparity. Vetra's loyalty mission is, in my opinion, one of the better ones. It revolves around the relationship between her and her younger sister, Sid. Throughout the game, the player knows that Vetra does have a sister, and that Vetra might be overly protective of her.
I just want an edge on those Ket bastards. If they ever got their hands on Sid, well, imagine if it was Sarah.
As you get to know Vetra, you can see where she's coming from, actually. She's had a rough life, so it makes sense that she'd want to keep Sid safe from that. Her sister Sid, however, is eager to get to work in Andromeda. Early on, you even meet Sid, and she offers Ryder a side mission or 2.
If someone's betraying the Nexus, you have to do something about it.
This helps to build Sid's character, Vetra's character, and their relationship together. This is a great setup for Vetra's loyalty mission, in which Vetra's worst fears become a reality. Sid gets in over her head, and ultimately Vetra and Ryder need to help her get out of a sticky situation. It resolves with Ryder being able to impact Vetra's character, either encouraging her to let Sid be more free, or cementing her protective nature. Although it's tropey as hell, it's still decent because you're familiar with the characters involved. Their actions have been telegraphed enough so they make sense, and it lets the player have an input on that character's game-long problem.
These are good people who made bad choices. Your sister did the right thing.
On the flip side, I found Drax's loyalty mission to be atrocious. As we're playing, before we begin Drax's mission, we learn 3 big things about him. First, he's a tough guy who was once seriously depressed after being severely wounded in war.
Everything hurt. A lot. All the time. No purpose to anything.
Next, he has a good relationship with his granddaughter Kesh, who saved him from his depression.
I keep the station functional, or as functional as possible, considering.
And lastly, he thinks that the Krogan should have more agency and a louder voice in Andromeda.
You'll forgive me if I didn't just trust a stranger from the Nexus. They haven't exactly treated us Krogan well.
We also find out that a human named William Spender, working on the Nexus, played a big role in getting most of the Krogan exiled from the Nexus, and forced them to create New Tuchanka. Spender's reasons are essentially that he's xenophobic towards Krogan.
We all wanted the Krogan gone. I just made it easier.
Which isn't really new in Mass Effect. As you can see, just like with Vetra, it's pretty tropey, but this isn't where the problem is. The problem is in the actual mission. Rather than teaming up with Drax to directly take on William Spender, or help out his granddaughter in some way, we're sent to help out some other Krogan who we're introduced to in this very mission. As the mission progresses, both Ryder and Drax find out that this Krogan is actually the romantic interest of Kesh, Drax's granddaughter.
Hi, guys.
It's played for laughs, but I think it's poor storytelling to immediately introduce a key character in a loyalty mission on such short notice. This is compounded by the fact that your mission is to rescue a transport from a guy working for William Spender.
You think Spender's involved?
Can it explain how they got the codes to the transport?
Past Mass Effect games established loyalty missions as culminations of story arcs that are important to your squad. So it feels empty when Drax's loyalty mission closely involves characters that you've only just learned about. There's even a subplot about Drax wondering if old warhorses like himself are even worth keeping around in Andromeda. Now, as cool of a concept as that sounds, I only learned about it during the closing moments of his mission. The game seemingly dismisses Drax's concerns, likely intending to bring it up in future content like a sequel or DLC, the latter of which we now know isn't coming. Going back to the loyalty mission, though, later down the line, Ryder does confront William Spender through dialogue in a separate mission.
You're just gonna throw me in a cell?
And, in the game's epilogue, it's revealed that things worked out for Kesh and her lover, so much so that Kesh has children. To me, it seems as if Drax's loyalty mission suffered so that later events could transpire. Separately, though. Mass Effect's writing problems don't end there, however. One of my absolute favorite things about the original trilogy was the world building. There were many incredible galaxy-wide problems, from things like the fresh scars of war between Turians and humans, the Krogan rebellions coupled with the ensuing deployment of the Genophage, and the terrible events surrounding the Quarians and the Geth. In Andromeda, there is not even a single comparable piece of story. Things like the Scourge, or the vanishing of the Jardin, or even the mysterious benefactor of the Andromeda Initiative itself, all allude to possibilities for good world building. But throughout the entirety of the game, the most that's ever done is merely establishing their existence, and that something might come to fruition later on. They don't serve to add complexity to the universe in the same way that we saw in the original trilogy, or even in the very first game. It feels like they got so carried away planning for future Andromeda games or content that they forgot to make this one worth playing. Even at the fundamental level of script writing, I think it falls short. Just like how some of the missions are worthwhile and enjoyable, there are absolutely some great lines or speeches within the game. The problem is that they are so quickly soiled by other bits of unbelievably poor dialogue.
Be careful. The snark is strong with that one.
For me, one of the biggest draws of the original trilogy was that it exuded this aura of being prestige sci-fi. Think more along the lines of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and less along the lines of Star Wars or Firefly. However, this isn't to say that Mass Effect Andromeda even needed that feeling. Honestly, from the moment we were given the teaser trailer featuring desert landscapes and Johnny Cash music playing over it, I started readjusting my own personal expectations. I started getting excited for how Mass Effect could maybe take on the space western genre. But in the end, it isn't even that. It's not TNG, it's not Firefly. At its worst, it comes off as a bad episode of The Big Bang Theory.
I think I really pissed that one off. Maybe because I shot him in the face.
In other circumstances, I think that would even be totally fine. The problem is that a precedent has been set with the first 3 games, and they went through all the trouble of finding a way to bring as much of those games into Andromeda while still avoiding the controversial ending of Mass Effect 3. My final big problem with the game is that it's open world. Don't get the wrong idea, I think that the art of each of the worlds is amazing. There's no shortage of gorgeous vistas. The problem is that these worlds aren't compelling to explore. There's not even much to explore. The open world seemingly exists just as a background for you to navigate through from mission to mission. The sand dunes of Eladin are amazing to behold the first few times, but it gets old quick. I think when they're at their best, open worlds offer you a chance to get lost in their details if you want to. It's why I love exploring in Bethesda games so much. Andromeda's open world shares some of the same problems that we saw in Dragon Age Inquisition, I think. It feels like an MMO, except without the fun multiplayer parts of an MMO. I think Andromeda would have been done so much better with a more structured format, like the previous games. Put a focus on the main story, the missions from squad mates, and drop maybe 75% of the side missions. It seems like there's just no good reason why this needed to be an open world game, and frankly, it suffered from it. Well, in conclusion, I think Mass Effect Andromeda kinda blows. Please go play the original trilogy if you haven't. They're really pretty good, don't let this deter you. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, this is my first post-playthrough review. If you've got the time, let me know what you thought. Also, if you'd like to see some of my Insanity playthrough, I made a supercut of most of the best and worst parts of the playthrough. Have a look at that if it sounds interesting. Until next time, peace.